started here with a picture of what you're seeing from Grant Park. But I want to say that one of the things we were charged with was to create a high-quality academic environment that is student-centered and reflects the university's mission, deep mission of social justice. The thought of building next to Louis Sullivan's Auditorium Theater was really, I think, a big issue in our mind, and we took that very, very seriously. The auditorium building, of course, I think is one of the most beautiful buildings in Chicago. Now, what we're asked to do is to put together a building of about 420,000 square feet. It ends up to be on a site of 1,700 square feet, which is very, very small. 17,000 square feet. So to accommodate this automatically implied that we had to do a high-rise building. Very, very important point here is that we always talked about, not about building, but about campus and making a stronger campus. Now, one of the first diagrams that we came up with, actually we even had this at our interview, was that if we're going to build a tall building here, one of the things that we usually associate with high-rise buildings is a central core, which you'll see in most of your standard office buildings. But because of the need for large assembly spaces within this, we knew right away that we had to offset the core. In this case, we put it to the north. We also talked a lot about making connections, creating neighborhoods in a typical way where if we're going to create a campus here, we had to think of a campus vertically, that we had to create zones which could be identified throughout the building that were recognizable, much like we find these zones in a horizontally planned campus. But another question, another difficulty that we had was the fact that we had to connect to the existing buildings on multiple levels. We have student services at the ground floor, which has its own neighborhood, its own atrium. We have the student union, which is on the next floor levels up, which connect directly to the Michigan Avenue lobby. Included in that is a practice room for the auditorium theater. Above that, we have the academic floors, the large classrooms and laboratories. This was possibly the most important part of this project, was to make sure those connections worked, because it then connected those buildings and gave new life and new energy to the auditorium building. All of this, was trying to capitalize, on the location, but also keep the spirit of the expression of diversity. So as we went through and started to design our structure, we also looked at the glass as having a pattern of gradation to complement the auditorium building. So we could pull this sort of idea of gradation, but in this case where the auditorium building goes from heavy to light, we went from light to dark. And we were able to come up with a system of mullion-less glass that allowed us to actually have a pattern of light and dark panels that kind of obscured this idea that we had all these different floor heights that we had to deal with, and was able to sort of achieve that pattern. We came up with the pattern that you see here, which went from a lighter to a heavier above. And in the end, perpetuates the culture of the design of our planning by the expression of the institution on the park. I think the great accomplishment here is that we continue our culture and look toward the future, in such a way as to say something about ourselves today.